It was an ordinary fall evening in the small farming town of Beason, Illinois. Police walked into a house so horrifying that seasoned officers nearly vomited on the spot. 5 members of the same family had been brutally slaughtered overnight: the father, the mother, and 3 children. Only one tiny survivor was found, barely clinging to life. One of the most shocking family massacres in the state's history. What happened inside that quiet home would shake the entire community and expose a killer no one saw coming. Who was behind this nightmare? And why was he so obsessed that even innocent children weren't spared? This case would later be known as the Beason bloodbath. Illinois is best known for its bustling city of Chicago. Bright lights, noise, endless movement. But far from that chaos lies Beason, surrounded by farmland and rolling hills. A place where crime is rare and people pride themselves on safety. In the late 1990s, 2 people called Beason home: Raymond "Rick" Gee and Ruth Ann Constant. Rick was known for his dedication and strength. After his biological father was killed in Vietnam, he grew up under the care of his mother, Judy, and his stepfather, William "Fat Man" Collar. Rick worked tirelessly at his stepfather's construction business in Lincoln, saving every dollar until he could start his own company, Gee Construction. He bought a small ranch-style home on the outskirts of Beason. It had a 2-car garage, a pool, and farmland where he raised chickens. Life was modest, but peaceful. To help pay off the mortgage, Rick decided to rent a room to a young woman named Ruth Ann Constant and her 2 children, 3-year-old Justina and 1-year-old Dylan. What began as a simple rental soon turned into a romance. Ruth was cheerful, caring, and adored children. Rick, hardworking and kind, was a family man at heart. In 1997, they married. Rick was 34, Ruth 27. Together, they blended their families. Rick's teenage daughter, Nicole. Ruth's children, Justina and Dylan, and eventually 3 more children followed: Austin, Jessica, and Tabitha. Life in the Gee household was busy but full of love. Rick worked long hours while Ruth cared for the kids and maintained the home. Every Sunday, they attended church. During weekdays, the children walked to the post office to catch the school bus, a 4-minute walk that became part of the town's daily rhythm. The Gee children were well known around Beason, polite, friendly, and close-knit. The postmaster remembered them fondly, especially Dylan, the spirited middle child who often couldn't sit still. But behind the cheerful scenes, Ruth and Rick struggled with one heartbreaking challenge. Their daughter, Jessica Lynn, born with a severe neurological disorder that confined her to a wheelchair. Unable to care for her properly in Beason, they made the painful decision to place her in a state medical facility. It was a choice that weighed heavily on them, but they did what they thought was best. Among all the children, Dylan was the one who tested their patience. Energetic and impulsive, he struggled in school. Teachers constantly sent reports about his behavior, describing him as restless and defiant. Doctors diagnosed him with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and prescribed medication, but it barely helped. His mother worried that one day his anger might spiral out of control. Even Rick confided to his own mother that if they didn't get Dylan under control, one morning the family might not wake up. Still, despite his behavior, Dylan wasn't evil. He was a boy trying to find his place, frustrated, misunderstood, and drawn deeper into violent video games that gave him a sense of control. By 2006, the family had grown once again with the birth of baby Tabitha. Rick's eldest daughter, Nicole, had also married her childhood sweetheart, Christopher Harris. They lived nearby with their newborn daughter, Alice. The extended Gee family often gathered together, helping one another and sharing in small-town joys. But by 2009, Rick's construction business began to struggle. The economy was poor and jobs were scarce. Financial stress took a toll on the household, but they continued to push forward. Despite their troubles, they were still seen as one of the kindest families in Beason, the kind you'd never imagine would face tragedy. On Monday afternoon, September 21st, 2009, a 10-year-old boy pedaled his bicycle toward the Gee home. He was excited to show his friends Austin and Dylan his new bike. As he reached the porch, something stopped him cold. The front door was ajar, the porch smeared with blood. Frozen in fear, the boy shouted for his friends. No one answered. Panicking, he jumped back on his bike and raced to Nicole's nearby house, where he found Rick's stepfather, Fat Man, and cousin Adam helping with renovations. Out of breath, the child stammered that something terrible had happened at the Gee home. Adam and Fat Man immediately dropped their tools and sped toward the house. When they arrived, Adam approached the porch and saw it for himself. The blood, the knife on the step. Fat Man tried to calm himself, suggesting maybe the family had slaughtered a chicken. But Adam knew better. He stepped over the pool of blood, pushed open the door, and flicked on the light. What he saw made his blood run cold. Lying face down in a pool of blood was Raymond Rick Gee, his head crushed, his body beaten beyond recognition. Adam froze in shock and stumbled backward, yelling for Fat Man to call 911. Minutes later, police cars and ambulances descended on the quiet street. Nicole arrived, confused and terrified, begging officers to tell her what was happening to her family. No one had answers yet. When law enforcement entered the home, they encountered a nightmare unlike anything they had ever seen. Blood covered the walls, floors, even the ceiling. It looked less like a home and more like a war zone. In the hallway lay 14-year-old Dylan, curled up in a fetal position, wearing only shorts. His skull had been shattered. Nearby, in the main bedroom, officers found Ruth, still in her nightgown, her head partially missing. In the bathroom was 11-year-old Austin, face down, barely recognizable. In another room, 16-year-old Justina lay across her bed, her Bible nearby, the upper part of her skull gone. The officers had seen violence before, but not like this. Then came the most haunting discovery of all. In the corner of a dark closet, barely visible beneath the shadows, was the small body of 3-year-old Tabitha. At first, they thought she was gone like the others. But then, a twitch, a faint movement of her tiny hand. She was alive. Officers immediately called for medics. One of them knelt beside the girl, gently stroking her back as she tried to breathe. Tabitha was covered in blood, her skull fractured, and one arm broken, but somehow she had survived 14 hours alone among the dead. Paramedics rushed her to an ambulance as Nicole screamed in despair, realizing that her entire family was inside that house. She wasn't allowed to go in. Officers restrained her, fearing what she might see. She was placed in the ambulance beside her baby sister, clinging to hope that at least one member of her family might live. The ambulance sped toward St. Francis Medical Center in Peoria, nearly an hour away. Police cars followed closely behind. In that moment, Beason's peace was shattered forever. News of the massacre spread quickly. Residents poured into the streets in disbelief. People who had never locked their doors now shut their windows and stayed inside. Rumors swept through the town. Who could do something like this? Some thought it was a robbery gone wrong. Others whispered about a stranger seen driving through town the night before. By evening, television crews and journalists filled Beason's quiet roads. filming the flashing lights around the Gee home. To the outside world, it looked like a horror movie. But for Beason's residents, it was the death of their innocence. Later that night, the coroner arrived to collect the bodies. Forensic teams carefully documented the scene. The next day, Rick's mother, Judy, was called to identify the victims. She had not yet been told what happened until her granddaughter Nicole called, sobbing, telling her the unthinkable. At the morgue, Judy was shown photographs. Rick, Ruth, Justina, Dylan, Austin, and little Tabitha, barely clinging to life. The coroner's report confirmed the brutality. Every victim had been beaten to death, not shot as initially believed. Rick suffered 39 blows, 13 to the head. Ruth, 28. Austin, 21. His skull fractured on both sides. Justina, 15. Her skull destroyed. Dylan, over 100 wounds, more than half to his head. It was a massacre. The Gee family hadn't just been killed, they'd been obliterated. By dawn, fear gripped the entire county. Beason had never seen a crime like this. There were no gunshots, no signs of forced entry, only destruction. Who could commit such savagery, and why? Investigators began scouring the home for clues. The crime scene was sealed off as dawn broke over Beason. Police marked every bloodstain, every shattered fragment, and every footprint. The quiet farmland community was now the center of one of Illinois' most disturbing murder cases. Outside the Gee home, officers discovered something vital, a distinct shoe print in the mud near the porch. It was clear and detailed, matching a popular brand of athletic sneaker. Whoever left it had been close enough to the house to see everything. Investigators photographed it, made a plaster cast, and carefully stored it away. That single print might be the only link to the killer. Inside, forensic teams uncovered another piece of evidence, a bloody handprint on the bathroom countertop, near where young Austin had been found. The surface was glass, smooth and difficult for prints to stick to, but the mark was unmistakable. Technicians used special powders and chemical treatments to lift it, hoping it would lead to an identity. Everywhere else, chaos reigned. Broken glass, splintered furniture, smeared blood. It was clear the killer had spent time inside, moving through each room deliberately, ensuring no one was left alive. As the first day of the investigation began, the small town was gripped by fear. Beason had no local police department, so the Logan County Sheriff's Office and Illinois State Police took charge. Officers went door to door, interviewing neighbors and collecting any shred of information that might explain how an entire family could be wiped out overnight. No one had heard gunshots or screams. Only silence. One neighbor, however, recalled something strange. Sometime after midnight, he'd noticed a gray pickup truck driving slowly toward the Gee residence. It wasn't a familiar vehicle. The details seemed small, but investigators seized on it. They released a sketch of the truck, silver or light gray, with unusual vertical exhaust pipes protruding from the bed behind the cab. Roadblocks were set up, and officers stopped every similar truck they could find in the area. Despite the urgency, nothing matched. Whoever had been in that pickup had vanished into the night. Meanwhile, at St. Francis Medical Center in Peoria, 3-year-old Tabitha fought for her life. Her skull was fractured, her arm broken, and she was slipping in and out of consciousness. Doctors weren't sure if she would survive, and if she did, whether she'd ever remember what she saw. Police stationed an officer at her hospital room 24 hours a day. Tabitha wasn't just a victim. She was the only living witness. If she woke up and could speak, she might hold the key to everything. At her bedside sat her older sister, Nicole Gee, and Nicole's husband, Christopher Harris. Nicole was shattered. She'd lost nearly everyone she loved in a single night. Harris stayed by her side, comforting her, changing shifts with her mother Judy, and promising that whoever had done this would pay. To everyone around them, he appeared to be the perfect grieving husband. Detectives began questioning everyone connected to the family. Nicole was interviewed first. Despite her emotional state, she tried to remember every detail of the last few days. She told investigators her parents were loving, peaceful people. She couldn't think of anyone who wanted to hurt them. The detectives asked about possible grudges, business disputes, or personal conflicts, but there were none. Rick had a few unpaid jobs due to the economy, but nothing violent or suspicious. Ruth had no enemies, no secret life. It didn't make sense. Next, they turned to Christopher Harris. He had known the Gee family for years, since he was a teenager dating Nicole. He told detectives that on the night of the murders, he'd been out with his younger brother Jason Harris at a bar in Lincoln, about 20 minutes away. They'd been drinking, hanging out, then went home. He insisted he knew nothing about what happened until the next day. Police made notes. Harris seemed calm and cooperative. No visible scratches, no cuts, no bruises. Nothing to suggest he'd been involved in a violent struggle. On paper, his alibi looked solid. 2 days passed, then 3. The press surrounded the Logan County Courthouse. Reporters demanded answers. How could 6 people, 5 dead, 1 clinging to life, be attacked without anyone noticing? Investigators combed through the Gee property again. They found blood droplets outside, suggesting the killer might have injured himself. But no hospitals in a 300-kilometer radius reported treating anyone with unexplained cuts or bruises. The trail was cold. Back in Beason, rumors grew wild. Some said it was a drifter passing through. Others whispered about satanic rituals or revenge killings. A few even suspected Dylan, the 14-year-old, because of his behavioral issues, a cruel theory that reflected how desperate people were for an explanation. The police knew time was running out. They needed a breakthrough. On September 28th, 1 week after the murders, hundreds gathered for a memorial service. Inside a small community hall, photos of the Gee family lined the walls, smiling faces frozen in time. At the front stood an open casket for Rick. His was the only body that could be viewed. Urns containing the ashes of Ruth, Dylan, Justina, and Austin sat beside him. Nicole stood in silence, clutching Tabitha's favorite stuffed toy. Beside her was Christopher Harris, who had become her source of strength through the tragedy. To everyone there, he was the image of a devoted husband helping his wife survive the unthinkable. But not everyone was convinced. Among the attending officers, some quietly wondered about his calmness, about his perfectly intact hands, and his unusual willingness to help with every detail of the investigation. 2 days after the funeral, something subtle caught an officer's attention at the hospital. As Nicole and Chris visited Tabitha's room, the officer standing in the hallway noticed the shoes Harris was wearing, a pair of sneakers that looked identical to the ones whose print had been found in the mud outside the Gee house. At first, it seemed like coincidence. Many people wore that brand. Still, the officer reported it to his superiors. Investigators immediately checked their records, and sure enough, the pattern matched perfectly. The size wasn't confirmed yet, but the tread design was the same. When detectives looked closer at Harris's background, small cracks began to show. Christopher Harris wasn't the clean-cut family man he appeared to be. His record revealed a past littered with minor crimes: shoplifting, writing bad checks, possession of marijuana, all more than a decade old, but proof of a reckless streak. Then they uncovered something else. Nicole and Chris had divorced in 2006. Despite separating, they had later reconciled and had another child. But the marriage had been far from perfect. The divorce papers even cited physical cruelty as a cause. Detectives couldn't ignore it. Could Harris have been hiding something darker beneath the calm exterior? They called him back in for a second interview, this time with sharper questions. He didn't hesitate to cooperate. He gave fingerprints and palm prints voluntarily. When asked, he handed over his sneakers for examination. He even allowed them to search his vehicle, a light gray pickup truck that looked almost exactly like the one a neighbor had described. There was only one difference. It didn't have those distinctive chrome exhaust pipes. Still, officers couldn't shake the feeling they were getting closer. When investigators searched Harris's truck, they didn't find blood. But beneath a tarp in the truck bed, they found something that made everyone pause. A personal computer belonging to the Gee family. Harris claimed it wasn't what it looked like. He said Rick had loaned him the computer weeks earlier, and he simply hadn't returned it yet. But the detectives weren't buying it. Next, they went to the home where Harris lived with his brother Jason and Jason's girlfriend, Jennifer Ernest. Behind a shed in the backyard, they found a chrome weightlifting bar, the kind that, if attached to a pickup bed, could easily resemble the chrome exhaust pipes seen by the neighbor. Then, just a few meters away, they discovered a crowbar hidden near a creek, partially buried in the grass. A gray pickup, the missing family computer, the fake chrome pipes, and now a potential murder weapon. Too many coincidences to ignore. But still, the evidence was circumstantial. The investigation needed proof that directly tied Harris to the crime scene. That proof came when forensic analysts completed their work on the bloody handprint from the Gee bathroom. Under magnification, ridge by ridge, the match was confirmed. The print belonged to Christopher Harris. It was the breakthrough detectives had been waiting for. The handprint placed him inside the house at the crime scene on the night of the murders. Investigators confronted Harris with the evidence. His demeanor changed instantly. Calm turned to silence. He stopped answering questions and invoked his right to remain silent. On October 2, 2009, police arrested Christopher Harris for the murder of 5 members of the Gee family and the attempted murder of 3-year-old Tabitha. When the news hit Beason, disbelief rippled through the town. The man everyone thought was grieving beside the victim's family, the man who attended the funeral and wept with Nicole, was now accused of being the killer. Residents were stunned. Many refused to believe it. To them, Chris was family. Even Nicole stood by him, publicly declaring his innocence. She wrote online that her husband had been framed and that the police were desperate to pin the murders on someone. She insisted he had no injuries, no scratches, and that he wasn't even capable of violence, claiming he was so gentle. He refused to gut fish for cooking. But to investigators, the evidence was overwhelming. The stolen computer, the crowbar, the shoe print, and, most damning of all, the bloody handprint linking Harris directly to the scene. Still, detectives wanted to understand why. Why would a husband and father massacre an entire family, including children he'd once helped raise? Harris continued to deny everything. He insisted he had nothing to do with the killings and said the police were making a terrible mistake. His younger brother, Jason Harris, who'd been with him that night, was also arrested for obstruction and questioned repeatedly. At first, Jason supported his brother's alibi. He repeated the same story. They'd spent the night drinking at a bar in Lincoln, then gone home. But under mounting pressure and faced with possible life imprisonment for aiding a murderer, Jason began to break. Days later, he changed his story. Then he changed it again. In total, he gave investigators 13 different versions of what happened that night. Each time, small details shifted. Each time, his loyalty eroded just a little more. Finally, he told a story that made detectives' blood run cold. According to Jason, that night had started with drugs, alcohol, and a dangerous idea. The brothers had spent the evening drinking heavily and snorting cocaine. When their girlfriends refused to join them, Chris suggested they find someone else. Jason claimed his brother became obsessed with the thought of 16-year-old Justina Gee, Nicole's younger sister. Chris allegedly told Jason that Justina had been flirting with him and that she wanted him. Jason said he tried to laugh it off, assuming his brother was joking. But Chris was serious. In his intoxicated haze, he decided to drive to the Gee house, uninvited, intending to confront Justina. Jason stayed in the truck while Chris took a crowbar from the back and walked up to the porch. Moments later, Jason heard shouting, followed by the sounds of a struggle. Then came screams, first a man's, then a woman's, then something far worse. Jason said he froze, paralyzed by fear. Through the window, he saw flickering light and violent movement. Then a crash, glass shattering, and someone flew out of the house, landing hard on the lawn. It was Dylan Gee, blood running down his face. The boy tried to get up, screaming for help. Jason watched, horrified, as Dylan stumbled toward him, pleading, "Help me, he's killing them." But Jason didn't move. He couldn't. He sat trembling in the truck as Chris ran outside, chasing the boy across the yard. Chris caught up to him near the back fence and began swinging the crowbar again and again. When Dylan stopped moving, Chris went back inside the house. Jason said he stayed frozen behind the wheel, terrified. When Chris finally returned, he was carrying the Gee family's computer and was covered in blood. He tossed the crowbar into the truck and told Jason to drive. On the road out of town, Chris threw his sneakers and bloody clothes out the window, then demanded Jason burn what was left when they got home. That, Jason said, was the truth. When confronted with his brother's confession, Chris Harris told a very different story. He claimed that when he entered the Gee house, he found the family already dead. He said 14-year-old Dylan had gone on a violent rampage, killing his parents and siblings in a fit of madness. According to Harris, he stumbled upon the aftermath and was then attacked by Dylan, who came at him with a knife. Chris said he fought back in self-defense, killing the teenager only to stop the assault. The rest of the family, he claimed, was already gone. Detectives listened in disbelief. The evidence contradicted everything he said. The blood patterns, the injuries, the timeline, all pointed to a single attacker, not a child. And there was no proof anyone in the Gee household had used a knife that night. The blade found on the porch had Harris's fingerprints, not Dylan's. In 2013, nearly 4 years after the murders, the case of State of Illinois versus Christopher Harris finally went to trial. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, grieving neighbors, and police who'd worked the case from day one. The prosecution called it one of the most savage crimes ever committed in Logan County. They presented physical evidence, forensics, and testimonies that painted Harris as a man driven by lust and rage. They argued that his motive was sexual, that he had entered the Gee home that night, intending to assault 16-year-old Justina, and when confronted by Rick, he turned violent. The defense countered with the Dylan theory, portraying the teenager as a disturbed boy with behavioral problems and violent tendencies. They described him as addicted to video games, impulsive, and unstable. They cited his ADHD diagnosis, his history of discipline at school, and even brought up teachers' reports about his misbehavior. Their argument was simple. Dylan snapped. Chris Harris just happened to walk in at the wrong time, but the evidence told another story. Forensic experts testified that the angle and force of the blows were consistent with an adult male, not a teenager. The victim's defensive wounds suggested they'd been overpowered by someone much stronger. Blood spatter on Harris's jeans, recovered from a trash pile behind his brother's home, matched several of the victims. Then came the most damning evidence: the bloody handprint lifted from the bathroom countertop, a perfect match to Christopher Harris's palm. It placed him inside the house during the murders, not afterward as he claimed. The prosecution also revealed Harris's social media posts in the days before the crime. Rants about wanting to get away from negativity, and messages hinting at resentment toward Nicole's family. Finally, prosecutors called Jason Harris to the stand. His testimony was devastating. He recounted the night, the drugs, the plan, and his brother's descent into violence. The courtroom sat silent as he described Dylan's desperate attempts to fight back and protect his family. Jason's voice shook as he admitted he'd done nothing to stop it. Then came an unexpected twist. A former cellmate of Harris took the stand, claiming Chris had confessed everything to him in prison. According to the inmate, Harris said he attacked Rick when the man refused to let him into Justina's room. He beat Rick to death with the crowbar, then turned on Ruth when she came to help. When Dylan tried to defend his mother with a kitchen knife, Harris overpowered him and threw him through the window. The inmate said Harris expressed no real remorse, only frustration that he hadn't burned down the house to destroy the evidence. The confession sealed the prosecution's case. After a 6-week trial, the jury deliberated for just 12 hours. On May 31, 2013, Christopher Harris was found guilty on all counts: 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder for little Tabitha. During sentencing, he addressed the court, claiming he had made bad choices that night, but still insisted he hadn't committed the murders. His words moved no one. The judge handed down one of the harshest sentences in Illinois history: 5 consecutive life terms, plus 30 years for attempted murder, 30 years for home invasion, and 20 years for robbery. Christopher Harris would never walk free again. His brother Jason, in exchange for his testimony, received a 10-year suspended sentence for concealing a crime and obstructing justice. Many felt the punishment was far too lenient, considering he'd done nothing to stop his brother that night. But without his cooperation, prosecutors might never have secured a conviction. In the months that followed, Beason slowly tried to heal. The Gee home stood empty, a constant reminder of the horror that had unfolded inside. Eventually, with approval from the state environmental agency, the fire department burned the house to the ground, erasing the physical scar but not the memory. At St. Francis Hospital, Tabitha continued her long recovery. Despite multiple surgeries, doctors were amazed by her progress. The trauma to her skull caused partial memory loss, a small mercy that spared her from reliving that night. 2 Illinois state police officers were assigned to protect her during her hospital stay. Over time, they became her playmates and surrogate uncles. They painted her nails, read her stories, and even threw her a small birthday party in her hospital room. After weeks of therapy, Tabitha learned to walk and speak again. When she was finally discharged, her older sister Nicole, now widowed in all but name, took custody of her. The two began rebuilding what little remained of their family. To honor the victims, Beason residents built a memorial playground on the edge of town. A granite plaque bears the names of Rick, Ruth, Justina, Dylan, and Austin Gee, along with a simple inscription: "In their memory, may children always find laughter here." For many, Dylan's name carried a special weight. Early rumors had painted him as the possible killer, echoing Harris's false story. But investigators and teachers who knew him fought to restore his image. They called him what he truly was: a boy who tried to save his family. When television producers later recreated the case for a true crime series portraying Dylan as a violent child, local officers wrote an open letter condemning it. They reminded viewers that Dylan had died a hero, not a monster. If this case moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.